immortality, power, and a legacy spanning over 1,000 years. In the world of the Vampire Diaries and the original vampires are more than just creatures of the night. They are the foundations of vampires itself. But what exactly is an original vampire and what makes them so powerful? The originals, or the original family, were first the Mikaelson family. You have Psychopath A.
Accident? He murdered my wife, his own mother, who sought to cleanse him of his beast-like nature. He betrayed me. He turned my entire family against me.
Psychopath B.
Hello. Lovely to see such a handsome face after a long journey.
Psychopath C.
I'm Elijah. You heard of me?
Yes.
Psychopath D.
I was made that way because of that box. Every time I close my eyes, I go back to that black horizon. A place where I was abandoned and forgotten by my own family.
And then you have Psychopath E, F, G, H, I, and the rest of the alphabet, being obviously Klaus and Kol. The originals were created over 1,000 years ago by a spell casted by their mother, Esther. This spell forever changed the supernatural world, and it tends to be regarded as the most important event in the entirety of the Vampire Diaries universe, as it is the creation event for the titular supernatural creatures, that being vampires. The story begins in the 10th century, in a time when humans, witches, and werewolves lived in harmony, but then everything changed when werewolves attacked. The Mikaelsons were a human family, but after the tragic loss of their youngest child Henrik to a werewolf attack, their mother Esther, a powerful witch, sought a way to protect the rest of her family. Using a really dark version of magic, Esther was able to turn her family into the first vampires. She used the power of the sun as an actual representation of their forthcoming powers and abilities. She drew on the power of the wild oak tree, a mystical tree that can exist for an eternity, as an actual representation of their forthcoming immortality. And finally, she used the blood of a doppelganger, probably the single most powerful source of readily accessible power, in order to bind all of the ingredients together to create what is dubbed as the serum, or the original serum. Later on that night, Mikael laced wine with the aforementioned serum and proceeded to drive his sword into all of his children, killing all of them. Finally, to complete the transformation, each of them had to drink human blood, sealing their fate as the first vampires.
My father didn't want to run anymore. He wanted to fight and be superior to the wolves. Where they could bite, we had to bite harder. Where they had speed, we had to be faster. Agility, strength, senses.
Everything could be heightened. Our family could live forever.
At what cost? This magic you speak of breeds consequence. This is the makings of a plague, Esther. The spirits will turn on you. Please, Ayana. I will have no part in it.
If she will not protect our family, then it is in your hands alone, my love.
Now we've gone down how the originals were made, what exactly makes an original vampire different from a regular vampire. First and foremost, they are stronger, faster, and much more resilient than any other vampire. They can compel humans, regular vampires, and even hybrids to do their bidding. This is because anyone that is partly a side vampire or a non-original vampire can still be compelled. They are virtually indestructible. Whether or not there's a physical limitation to how indestructible they are is pretty much unknown, but we know that they can survive explosions without any loss in damage, as we saw Elijah survive a point-blank explosive bell blast with only damages to his clothes, but none to Elijah physically. So per the versus canon, originals are completely invulnerable to physical attacks, including explosions, so it's very likely you are physically incapable of removing their heads, and according to Rebekah, their heart can regenerate if it's ripped out.
Do you ever want to just rip out his heart and see how long it takes to grow back?
Now if you ask me, can they survive nukes? I have absolutely no idea. But as far as we know, per the universe's canon, they are indestructible. However, they do have a few weaknesses. The only things that can actually kill an original or a white oak stake obviously has been driven directly into the heart of said original. The white oak stake obviously being a stake carved from the white oak tree, as it was decreed in the Vampire Diaries.
That the tree that gave us life could also take it away.
Now, the wild stake isn't the only fatal weapon to an original. The super venom, a venom specifically crafted by Lucien that merges all 7 strains of werewolf venom into one ultra powerful werewolf venom that was enhanced by a lot of magic to make it a truly lethal bite to any and all vampires, including originals. The bite, unlike regular werewolf venoms, works very fast, as in you begin seeing its effects within the hour or slightly afterwards. And you only have a few hours to live, as in you only have a few hours to probably find a cure, which is rare to create. Further lethal methods to cure an original includes the enchanted forms made by combining Marcel's werewolf venom with the Hollow's magic. There's also the anti-magic barrier, which can strip any vampire of their immortality and force their body to actually enact the events that cause their death, and as they aren't immortal anymore, they die completely this time. Finally, if a witch actually possess a ridiculous amount of magic equivalent to the power released from the violent deaths of 100 witches, then they are also able to actually kill an original. There's also a way to incapacitate them, although it doesn't kill them outright, which is to stab them in the heart with a magic imbued dagger being dipped in the hollowed out ashes from the wild oak tree. This way they can be incapacitated until the dagger is finally removed from their heart. It's important to note only a novel original or a human can actually use this weapon. If a regular vampire actually uses it against an original, they die. There's also another way to avert their immortality, that being the cure, which was created by Ketsia. However, everything else, being regular weapons or sunlight or even basic werewolf venom, are mere inconvenience for them. But anyways, out of all the originals, there's one original who stands apart from the rest, as in the most infamous, the most psychotic, and is seen as the de facto leader of the siblings, that being Klaus Mikaelson.
Klaus is from a different bloodline. Of course, when my father discovered this,
He hunted down and he killed my mother's lover and his entire family. Not realizing, of course, that he was igniting a war between species that rages until this day.
A war between the species?
The vampires. And the werewolves.
So Klaus's real father was from a werewolf bloodline? What does that make Klaus? A werewolf? Or a vampire?
Klaus is not just a vampire, he's a hybrid, which is a part vampire and part werewolf. This unique vampire type is as a result of Klaus being born a werewolf, as his biological father isn't actually Mikael, but actually a werewolf named Ansel. And obviously the later vampire serum that was created by Esther heightens his pre-existing abilities that he had as a werewolf. This therefore made him stronger than everyone in his family after he became a vampire, as he was the only one that actually had that extra boost. Also, he has another thing over them, which is that the aforementioned silver daggers dipped in wild ash does not work on him. This is due to him being part werewolf, therefore he is immune to silver, meaning if he stabs with silver daggers, it will heal instantly, hence making the weapon useless against him. However, this was until Kol, with the help of Davina, created a golden dagger to actually circumvent Klaus's immunity to silver, to be able to actually use one of the daggers to actually incapacitate him. Now, the originals aren't just powerful, they're also the source of every vampire in the Vampire Diaries universe. This is because the originals are actually capable of making more vampires, although nowhere near as strong as they are. When they turn humans into vampires, their bloodlines begin. This connection is why killing an original will result in the death of every vampire that's a part of the side bloodline that leads all the way back up to that specific original who actually started that bloodline. We discovered this with the death of Finn, in which after he was killed, both Sage along with her friend Troy died shortly afterwards, and the same thing happened with Elijah after he was killed, and the following Strix members all died as a result of it, and technically that would also mean that Tristan would have also died. However, when it comes to the Mikaelson family, power comes at a great cost, as in their immortality brought betrayal, heartbreak, and centuries of conflict. Their story is as much about family as it is about survival. They are bounded by the vow,
We stick together as one. Always and forever.
even when their alliances are tested constantly, which to be honest is mostly 80% between Klaus and Rebekah, 6 of this 80% obviously being Klaus. But now if you've actually watched all 3 shows in the Vampire Diaries universe, you will know that there are more types of original vampires that isn't just regular originals and the original hybrid, but in fact there were actually 3 further types of original vampires that were created in the modern era. Now, Enhanced Originals, or just Alaric, is a genetically engineered original created by Esther Mikaelson personally as a weapon to kill her children once and for all. Now, before I detail the differences between an Enhanced Original and the regular Originals or original hybrid, I have to say that technically speaking, all genetically altered originals are the exact same way with slight differences. The reason why Lucien was that impressive against Klaus was because he's a much better fighter than both Marcel and Alaric. But in truth, Alaric is probably at a similar strength level to both Marcel and Lucien. Even if they are stronger than him, they will only be slightly stronger than him. Now for Alaric, he shares all of the abilities regular originals have, and unlike them, almost none of the things stated and proven that can kill an original will be more than a minor inconvenience to Alaric. There are only 4 things that can kill Alaric. The first being because Esther didn't want Alaric to live longer than 1 human lifespan, so she decided to link his life force to a human, that being Elena. Meaning when and however Elena dies, Alaric dies also, which is how he died the first time. However, after this point, this seems to be a weakness to Alaric, but there were still a few ways to actually kill him. One of which is a super venom, and therefore the enchanted thorns will both actually work on him. Another way is a ridiculous amount of magic, similar to what actually kills an original, but probably a lot more powerful. And finally, the anti-magic barrier, as we actually saw Alaric nearly die to it, but he was medically saved by Job by the cost of his immortality. Then obviously there's the cure, which won't be able to actually kill him, but is actually able to revert him back into a human. As for everything else, it barely damages him. Not sunlight or werewolf venom or the wild stake or the silver daggers or any other physical weapon would do much to him. As for his strength, he is drastically stronger than all of the originals, to the point that the originals are like toddler vampires to him. Klaus may be more so a threat, but Alaric is still much stronger than him, as he absolutely manhandled Klaus with little to no issues.
I wanted you to kill him. You helped him take the final step.
Upgraded Originals is another version of a genetically altered original or a genetically enhanced original, and the reason why they were actually called an upgraded original is from Lucien dubbing the spell as
Be an upgrade.
Now there are 2 upgraded originals to date, that being Lucien and Marcel. Upgraded originals share a lot of similarities of Alaric, apart from a few advantages they have that puts them above Alaric, which is that the super venom does not work on them as it already exists within their body, and therefore neither does the thorns. However, excluding the death of Elena, everything else that said affects Alaric also affects the upgraded originals. For example, the anti-magic barrier, the cure, and a lot of power. Finally, there was a specific dagger created by Freya using Lucien's ashes, Esther's magic, the super venom, and her blood to make a weapon that can even kill an upgraded original. This obviously wouldn't have worked on Lucien in season 3 because, well, he's still alive at that point, meaning that Freya wouldn't be able to actually get her ashes to add to the dagger. But if he was actually resurrected after the knife was actually created, it will kill him if stabbed directly in the heart. When it comes to the physical advantages, they are obviously much stronger than an original, as Marcel was able to easily dog walk both Elijah and Klaus at the exact same time. But when you compare them to Alaric, they are probably relative or slightly stronger than Alaric. But they do actually have one weapon that gives them a massive advantage over Alaric if the 2 characters actually come to a blow with Alaric, which is, like I mentioned earlier on, being the super venom, which is released in their bite. And like I said earlier on, there really isn't much of a cure for it, other than obviously Freya's concoction, but that's really hard to actually create, and there's really only like a few. Hope is easily the most powerful vampire in the verse. Whether or not she's as physically strong as Lucien, Marcel, or Alaric is very much unknown. But because of the fact that Hope is an extremely powerful witch, puts her above all of the others. Hope, as you know, is a hybrid of 3 species, that being a witch, a werewolf, and an original vampire. And yes, Hope is an original vampire because we saw her compelling another vampire, something only originals can actually do. And finally, everything that actually mentioned for the genetically altered originals in terms of their weakness and what can actually kill them, yeah, none of that actually works on Hope. Like, none of it can do anything to Hope. It's unknown if the super venom or the cure would actually work on Hope. I highly doubt it actually would. This is mainly because Hope is just that powerful. But as for everything else, there is no witch powerful enough to have enough mystical energy to be able to even damage Hope, let alone kill her. This is basically the same thing with the anti-magic barrier because, again, it's just not powerful enough to actually be able to do much to Hope, let alone kill her. And finally, because Hope is a different type of original, the white oak stake or the golden daggers would not actually work on Hope because we actually saw one being used on Hope and it really only knocks her out for a few hours. And the reason why we know all of this wouldn't really damage Hope, and the reason why we actually know that Hope is just that durable and that physically resilient, is because in Legacies we actually saw that not even god magic from the most powerful being in the entire verse could even kill Hope. Could damage her, but not actually kill her. The only thing that can actually kill her is the red oak stake. You can also say the god spear, but the god spear wouldn't actually work without the red oak stake. The red oak stake, like the white oak stake, are just wooden stakes carved out of a red oak tree, created by Hope and Jersey before Hope was able to transition into a Tribrid. But anyway, speaking of Legacies, I know everyone that actually watched it knows Legacies was actually cancelled after 4 seasons on air. And if you want to find out why I actually believe it failed and actually got cancelled, then click on the video that's on screen now.